Hello, everybody. I'm Philip. Um, I think we're gonna go into what Trifork is just in a brief moment. I've been working in product design since '99. Started my own freelance thing way before anything was called UX, I guess. And quickly it picked up in marketing agencies in Copenhagen. Did a lot of products for Coca-Cola before I moved to Aarhus, where I now do a lot of things for Lego as a consultant. Yeah, some of you might question why I have a rabbit in a hole, but it will be pretty apparent once we go into that hole. Um, these are some of the clients I've been working for in my time. All of them is at least one website. Um, these are my hobbies. I have a ton of slides, so I'm not gonna go into every detail of it. But I love creating things, and I love to work with a lot of different materials other than pixels. Yeah. I love 3D printing at the moment. That's really my thing. And I have a slide about an analog about that later. I have a side gig for Netflix where I do graphic titles. And don't sit now and think that I'm just a graphic designer. It's really a side thing. I love to talk about politics and UX and research. So I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. Right now, we are just finishing up rebuilding the Lego house. All of the digital aspects of Lego House. We also did a new experience down there that actually has built-in generative AI. So that was pretty huge for us to get that approved by the Lego group. So I'm pretty proud of that. This talk is going to be about a pivotal point in my career when I went from working at contractors and agencies to working at Selling Group. And I know you've been at Selling Group lately, and it's a really, really big organization with a lot of management layers. So there's a lot of fun in hitting management layers. So when you are a freshman from just agencies, there's this thing with agencies where we get handed the assignments when all the politics are done, and we just need to produce. And that was really the mindset I started with Selling Group at this, that if I just do great work, they're all gonna be, it's all gonna be fine. But it's really much more than that. Actually, before I move on to the next slide, I would love to see a raise of hands of people that work in an organization or a company that has its own products and has like a product organization around it. That's good. That's good. So this talk is not only for you guys, it's also for the guys and girls that eventually will hit one of these organizations at some time. It's going to be a lot about the human aspects. So it's not about things that will go away anytime soon. We are how we are. We've been like this for 20,000 years. Eventually, I bet you've heard a lot about these things in human factors. So diving a bit more into the rabbit hole, as I said, I was really, really keen on just producing some awesome stuff. I've been doing websites for Lego and Coca-Cola. So of course I could do websites for Selling Group also. It's just not that easy. I I had this tendency for actually many years in Selling Group of creating a lot of user journeys and a lot of really shiny processes. Even though a lot of the project managers and product owners, they were really practical and not that theoretical. And we're going to come back to that. And I bet some of you have heard the term the corporate immune system. I really love that because it really says a lot. Some of the things that you come to expect within the immune system is something like bureaucracy processes and fear of change, micromanagement, and at least misaligned priorities. Some of these things you have to battle on a daily basis. This is my personal memo or anecdote. I've been carrying this around for, I think, over 10 years. And it really hit me when I saw it first time on Twitter. It was an Adobe product evangelist that says it, and I really felt that it connected with me. I really see it as one of the sort of the key aspects of user experience is that you can guide them really, really hard along the way, but really great UX is when they see sort of and they understand what they need to do and how you can connect their intent with your intent. And that's really when the magic happens. I follow a lot of influencers, but not on TikTok or Instagram and LinkedIn. And I really love this guy among a lot of other people. And I really have this great fear that I'm living in a echo chamber around UX ranters that just rants about corporate organization. And if that's the truth, then let me just be one of those ranters, right? He really understands how these corporate processes works, and he's been teaching over 300,000 pupils in all over the world. And I think one of the red lines in his agenda is that you can really, really go too hard on process and research, but you need to be able to have this momentum in your work that fits the company. So that's really one of the first thing you need to set your finger on is the company pulse. So as we all know, UX will never be perfect. There will always be more to discover. I've been in so many agile sprints where we argue whether we should keep continuing discovery. How much discovery should we do? Should we do 1 week sprints of discovery, 14 days? Should we do half a year? We sometimes did that at Selling Group. And when is discovery enough? I had a talk at the Aalborg at a conference a few years ago where the topic was when is discovery enough? And the funny thing is that there will always be somebody who misunderstands what you're doing. So it will never be completely perfect, right? So there's 100 ways of doing research. There's a lot more, but we usually have this tendency, and me including, to read a really good book, and then we have this urge to take that model or this the method in the book and just really try to incorporate it in our work. And yeah, we're also going to come back to that. You need to listen to the clues around you in your environment, in your product organization, or wherever you work, in terms of what is the design maturity of the company. Do you need to dig really deep for 5 months to do a user journey and personas if all they want is just a few insights to move on? We have this, I think we have a bias in our field in terms of creating value and just getting things right and getting things perfect. We see it with design systems. We can keep working on it and make it more perfect every day, right? Also with user testing, we can keep user tests. How many user tests do we need? Niels Norman has its a clear number on that, but you really need to put your finger on the pulse. All of these clues here is something that you need to listen to before starting research. What is the trust level to your stakeholders? What is the time and money aspect of the whole company? What is the momentum it's driving? Do you even have a clue of the roadmap for the next quarter of the next year? This is also why the new example of product trios is coming really, really great together because you get a more sense of what's going on with the business. So some of these agendas I'm pushing is that we need, as UXers, to get closer to business. So along with my 3D print at home, at least my wife could say that I try to solve everything by 3D printing. I think we have the same tendency in UX, especially when you're out young freshmen from school. You have 3-4 models from school you really want to put to use. I've seen a lot of young people starting at Selling Group and other places with an aspiration to use these tools, and it's all good. We need to use our tools, but we need a lot of them. but we shouldn't try to force everything down into one model. And I've seen that being done way too many times, that a process being forced into a model that shouldn't be or doesn't fit completely. I have this tendency sometimes to challenge process people in terms of what is the output, because sometimes process is done just for the process. Yeah, before we move on, I have three P's in my personal life. It's people, product, and process in that order. I know a lot of people I've been working at Salling Group has process and product, and that's it. So really, what I'm trying to argue here is both a lot of business elements, but especially we need to drive some people agenda. Yes.
When you say don't force everything into one process,
Yes.
is an example of a process that you've seen trying to do?
Lately, I've been hearing about these solution opportunity trees or whatever, and in general, it's just a structured form of nodes. And if you feel that you want to have another way of doing that, it should be up to you. But if the UX organization or if the design organization comes and says, now we need to do solution trees for everything, that's really a good example of, oh, I read about this thing. I think we should just spread it out into the company. Everybody needs to do it. There are many examples of situations where either the UX or the stakeholder has been put something on his desk or on his mind in terms of process and only gets confused because he didn't read the book. He has his way of doing it. Sometimes you need to allow people to work the way they want to do it, if that generates more trust between you, instead of coming and educate that person with a new process and a new way of doing things just because you just read it from a book, and encourage them to read the book, because then we can work together. It's not always going to be like that. So I really encourage UXers to try to encompass this very, very old quote. Some say it's from Shakespeare, but the complete quote as we see it is much more modern. And it's basically, what I'm trying to say is that we shouldn't spend too much time perfecting, let's say, user testing. We should broaden out and know a lot of things on the surface. So we every time we meet a problem, we have different aspects of dealing with that problem. I usually have this tendency of, when I get an idea or somebody else gets an idea or starts an initiative, is that question it. Because sometimes good things comes out of being a little negative in the start, just to say, is this really a good idea? Would this be the best way of doing it? I also do it with my designs. I do it openly in workshops. When I design a small component in front of my UX people, I usually start out by saying, what is the worst thing about this? Because then you really quickly capture the bad things, and I really use it as a tool against biases. A lot of the models that we know, a lot of people are talking about models from Spotify, and Netflix is also having models in different books. These models are being designed by these big companies, and they often also designed for companies with very high design maturity. And it's really interesting to see how people come about it, because it's like trying to treat this really, really nice new piece of wood. And there's a lot of guides in terms of how to treat it with oil or lacquer or something like that. And you need to use this sandpaper with grain 1000 to get it really, really smooth. But eventually, what we see in Danish companies often is that we have such a small user base because it's Danish products. So the economy is really, really low. Oftentimes you are the only UXer working on this. And you can't just take a sandpaper of grain 1000 to start working on this. You need to work really, really hard on it with much more granular tools. So that's why I really advocate for having a really wide toolbox, is because when you meet a product like this that just needs to be running stable, and maybe the checkout cart is not working, and you come with all your agendas about spending 5 months on a user journey. I've seen way too many user journeys ending up in the drawer, at the bottom of a drawer, especially if it's full of texts. And that's usually what you find in schools and in books, that they say you should have all this information in the user journeys. They should be like what they see, what they feel, and all the touch points. Eventually, you get so much text crammed into it that nobody will ever touch it. I've seen it way too many times. So we need to figure out how to broaden out the insights in a way that is what you call in English recipient focused. So it's not only for you and people that care about design. You need to hit people that doesn't really care about the research and design, and you really need to hit the right business value when you come up with your insight, right? You need to connect with the business value when when you do your insights. So that alludes to my my rabbit hole analogy, because if you have a stakeholder that needs some user tests from his client base, some would say then you would need at least 30, and then we do a pool of personas with percentages on them. We do affinity mapping, and then we do a user journey map. That would sort of be the big corporate way of doing it. Then we have nailed down all the information we can about the users. We can broaden it out to the rest of the organization with all the personas. People can come in the coffee breaks and read about the user journey that we print on the wall. But you didn't listen. This guy only needs a few insights to move on with his product. He has a deadline. Maybe he needs to look good in front of his boss with just a few pointers, and he has a lot of developers that are waiting to get ready for development. So that's one of the examples of having your finger on the pulse in terms of the momentum. You need to get a hold of what is the momentum, and what do people expect before you start diving down into research. In the product management landscape, they talk about this thing called the mini CEO. It's a mindset that you need to have. So what would you do if it was your company, if you owned the product and you could do everything? It would be nice for a designer to know that they have full mandate to do everything they want. I'm pretty sure that a lot of designers would say, I could do a better product if I didn't have all the constraints from stakeholders and management. We also need to remember that we also have all the financial accountability. So if I had a small company that sold, what do I know, baseball gloves, and I had a website, something like that, would I spend 5 months doing user research and user journeys? Or would I just launch a website and put some split test tools on it and just get it out and do something in a more quick manner and high momentum? So how would I spend my time on this? I did this graph a couple of years ago when I worked at Creuna. We were working with Arla, and the Arla subscription universe were getting to a point where we had a hard time figuring out what to optimize. We've been split testing it for a lot of time, and I was really telling my stakeholder that we were up here somewhere, right? And we kept spending more and more time on user research, and we let the split test run for longer and longer just to get that small value out of it. And eventually, when you come up to this point, you need to either scrap the product and figure out how to revamp it, make a version 2.0. At least that's what we see in games. But a lot of companies are here. I've been hired into a lot of companies that was somewhere around here, where you need to move fast. You didn't have time for perfection. Back to Joe's analogy about you can't do these processes where you take weeks on the research project. This is something that you could argue only is for the small companies, only for the companies that has low design maturity, or the companies where you are not necessarily alone, but a small UX team. But I would say for companies like Lego, Investors, and Salling Group and Arla, I think the stakeholders would be just as pleased if we start adopting a bit of this mindset to move a bit faster with our research, have a bit more value in our mindset. We are all kings of user intent and understanding the users. I'm not going to take that away from you, but try to step just one small step towards the business sometimes. I'm not saying you all don't already do that by now. Laura?
I wanted to ask, how do you balance doing it fast with also documenting enough so that whoever comes after you knows what's been done?
Talk to your stakeholders. What do they expect, first of all? Because at the very end, we're also going to come into that when I talk about trust building. At the very end, they're going to give you a seat at the table. So if you make them happy by listening to their momentum and what they want, then you're going to come a better way in the long term. But of course, spending a lot of time on documentation. I've always wanted to have analytics in Confluence because I have had a lot of project owners and also UXers that spend a lot of time documenting in Confluence and are very proud of the documents, visual, long, ChatGPT or not. I think we need to figure out who is going to read this. Will there ever be anyone who reads this? It's back to the thing where a user journey gets put in the drawer and never read again. I've seen this too many times in Salling Group that we handed over a document on the design system. We handed over documents on the user journey maps and a lot of other things. And I'm pretty sure nobody ever read them. The furthest we got was when we presented it. And then a few hours after that, I guess. So I think that mindset of being critical around, have I done too much or how can I move faster? I think that's where I'm getting at. What?
And also when you spend your time on.
Exactly. This was an analogy I brought into Salling Group when I started because in the hiring rounds, I was told that the Salling Group is a big lady to dance with. So my reply to that was, of course, that you just need to learn to dance along, even though it might be a slower version of the electric boogie that you normally do on the dance floor yourself. This is an analogy of a really, really good designer that works really well. I think I copied it also from myself. When I went into Salling Group, I could dance on my own, but eventually you need to dance with other people, right? Or else you won't be bit up to dance next time. And that's both in terms of momentum and rhythm. You need to put yourself into that pace. Back to your question also with the documentation. So it's about getting a sense of your environment. Yeah, I'm going to let this hang for a bit. Of course, I've heard a lot of people talking about the best thing you can do to trust is to keep consistently delivering good value. And of course, that is the main driver. We need to remember that. This is something that Joe also talks a lot about is the way out of this corporate immune system. It's just being consistent in your deliveries. Today, I'm going to talk a bit about how we can hack that. So not waiting a year or two for people to start trusting you, right? So there's this book called Surrounded by Idiots. Maybe some of you have read it. It's a book I got recommended by one of my designer friends from Copenhagen, and he said it completely changes his image on people. I brought this stack of Lego bricks with me because it has small quotes that fits our personalities in Trifork. So this is on our screens or on our table. So if I come down to a person that is like this, I know how to approach him. It's a really nice trick and a hack. Of course, I have the two yellow bricks on top of each other just to emphasize my personality. Doesn't mean I'm not structured though. There's this quote inside the middle of the book talking about how you need to, I wouldn't say put on another face when you're with other people, but these personalities are so deeply anchored in us that it's really, really hard to just rest in what you are when you start talking with other people. Because if you meet a very red person and a very dominating person, you kind of want to meet him at the middle, or at least at some way down his line, because that's when the communication will start flowing best. I've had a very structured introverted wingman most of my time, not only in the client side but also at the agency side. It's a really, really good balance for me to have somebody who's really structured with me. I am a bit chaotic and love to be in the ambiguity and all the places where there's chaos and motion, and I think it's a really, really good balance to combine people like that. This is a really old quote. It's also been used by what's he called? I forgot his name now. But it's also something that really well resonates with me, that this thing around, if we feel that the depth of our research or the fidelity of our design is really what hits the nail. It's much more than that. And I think we could do better in terms of playing the people aspect and being better at playing this interpersonal relationship. This was true 100 years ago. I bet it's also true in 100 years, especially with AI. So let's talk about the stakeholders. So we're going to dive a bit into trust building at the very end of the presentation. And that, of course, entails our closest relationships, and that's often the stakeholders or the sponsors we have, the product managers, the CTOs, and so on. But let's just focus on the stakeholders. It's not going to be stakeholder bashing today. So these are definitely some strengths that we could not necessarily learn from stakeholders, but it's really important that we lean into them. These focus on targets. They are closer to business and management. I have been in places where I was also close to management, and it really, really gave me a lot of seats at the table. It's really, really nice to have that. Also based on trust. And this whole roadmap ownership. I've been in places where the roadmap was something that was mentioned now and then, and the UXers had to ask for them to see that Gantt chart. I feel it's really important for you to know what comes next in the development, because we have this tendency, maybe I have this tendency, to come home from work and maybe be a little irritated that the priorities of maybe development were shifted away from UX, or the management focus was shifted away from UX. Maybe they cut down on the whole design team because they didn't feel that it was important, and then they went out and hired front-end people. You wouldn't understand these incentives unless you look at the roadmap, because sometimes they spend a year working on API systems that you will never see anything of. Maybe it is the top priority from management. And then I have this practical over theoretical, and that's at least my experience, that often stakeholders are more practical in their work, also servicing these models and processes, and they really want to move forward. I think also because they are closer to management, so people expect them to deliver on goals, and management usually are impatient. So that's where that comes from. Stakeholders also have weaknesses. I've seen a lot of low abstraction level. So if you try to explain deep research or some design systems with no screens, but just in design systems on empathy or mind maps or something like that, you really need to explain a lot where it's coming from and where it's going. Because I've been in situations with my Shiny processes where they didn't really know where I was going with what I was saying. So it's back to the part about being really value driven. I see a lot of these things in my echo chamber on LinkedIn, and I hope some of you can resonate with it, or unless the algorithm is just being cruel to me. But at least I see it. I see it maybe on a weekly basis. I've seen it in all companies, and we can laugh at it and we can curse it, but to some extent we could also go to lengths to understand it. So back to what I said before, we are kings on being user-centered. That's okay. Let's take the next step to being more value-centered. So before I talk about this slide, I just want to go back to this one again. This starts to sound like a lot like I'm pushing conversion rates on users. Rates are good, so don't focus on the users. This is not what I'm saying, but it could be taken that way. But it's a step in the direction of your stakeholders. It's a empathic step in the direction of the business, and if you show that, you will also get back. This is an analogy I usually use when I see a designer that's frustrated about why can't I move the business? Why can't I move the product? What is it about the management or the product management that just don't listen, want to listen? And the larger the company you work in, the more advanced gearbox you're a small gear inside, and it's really, really hard for you to change the tempo or the momentum in that gearbox, right? It's about following along, and then maybe if you can influence the gears around you, you can start to influence the speed of the motor. And sometimes you also experience that the motor change gears, and then you also need to change the tempo. If a new project comes along that needs to be rushed, and sometimes you need to rush things, even though it's something that UXers often curse a long way because it's on the backside of research, and we don't, front-end development has been booked for about 2 months' time. We need to be done with everything, including design. So there isn't much we can do about it, and that's what I'm trying to say is that you can try to force the engine into another tempo. It's going to be really hard. So my title for this presentation, what the books don't teach you, but I guess that's a lie. These are 3 books that I really love. I already talked about Surrounded by Idiots. I have The Politics of UX here. It's under a year old, and there's a new one. This is volume 1, People. Love it. There's a new one out called, I think it's called Operation. And it might not necessarily be for consultants, but it's also good to know how operation works in big organizations. And then Joe's own book, where he talks a lot about don't go too deep with your research, or at least if you work at a company like Netflix or Vestas, and you're allowed to go deep and you're expected to go deep, of course, I would encourage you to go into that rabbit hole, but always keep your wits outside the rabbit hole, right? I'm not going to go through what the politics of UX is about, but most of these chapters I have either already talked about or we will go into. This is, I think this is one of the first books I bought after I was at Selling Group, because I really, really wanted to get a recipe on what was going on. Yeah. So the next couple of slides is how to work with trust, and I want to know if we should take a small break to get something to drink before I get into the next 15 slides.
Do people need a bio break?
No? Okay. Let's go. So we changed the theme of the slides. This is actually a old slide deck. I already presented it to Laura in our bio group. You can call it that. Yeah. So what do we get from having a high trust environment? There's a lot of good numbers. of employee engagement, productivity, and financial gains. I guess some of this is confirmation bias. I'm already sorry. When I dive into this, I'm pretty keen on high trust environments are better than low trust environments. But why should we focus on trust building in UX? You know, I bet that trust building is equally important for a lot of other fields. If you're a mason or carpenter or electrician, you know, you need to be able to work together with other people. And if you have low trust in a building site, other things can go wrong too, right? But we are in a situation where we get hired to change things. We often get hired to change the agenda also. And the people we work around with was not the person that hired us. So we often find ourselves in a situation where we are misunderstood and we are given zero mandate, even though the expectations for us is to change the agenda, right? So how can we gain our own mandate? So back to this thing around, yeah, why isn't enough just to do good work? A lot of people have this notion that I can just do good work and then I don't have to massage other people. That's perfectly fine. I've seen that go in the right way in many cases. Remember this. I'm not this. If I was a really structured person that didn't really mind talking too much with other people, I would just do the design systems and do good work and, of course, talk value in my outcomes. But I like talking to people. And I bet that a lot of people going into UX either heard this, that we need to be semi-project managers and we at least need to be a little bit people persons in order to massage that good work into place, right? And that's what my slides are about. Oh, Daniel Kahneman, if you know Thinking Slow and Fast, he has been talking about this a lot about that people are really stale and you can't really change their mind. And if you try to present some really good work, if they already go into that meeting with a notion of something else, it's really hard to change that. This is a list of expected outcomes from low trust environments. Again, I'm not going to go through them all, but you can see something like low motivation, often shift employees, politics, hierarchies. And it shouldn't be a surprise to you, some of these things that comes into play. Resistance to change, I've seen that a lot of times. What do we do about low trust environments? Of course, we could do the good hard work and then see change over time. But these are some of the hacks you can put into place. When people challenge you in meetings, just have that yes hat on and say, let's test that. You know, I've seen this from stakeholders on the upper management levels that they wanted the button to be bigger or another color or moved it all over, or the logo need to be somewhere. And sometimes they're baffled that I really want to split test it. Let's just see how it goes, because it can be seen as a threat to some extent that I want to challenge you on this, right? It's another way of saying I'm going to challenge you on this and put it up on the website. Let's see who wins. Of course, that's a mildly wrong way of doing it, because you need to have this coherent, motivated team going forward, not split into a competition. And you need if you are doing split tests, you need to allow yourself to be wrong a lot of times and just to be able to laugh about it. Being able to explain things in layman's terms. Yeah, I often say, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. I love that that term. And yeah, it's pretty natural for me, at least, to argument for my designs in a way that other people can understand. But I've also seen a lot of people trying to use fancy words to sell design, and it does unfortunately the exact opposite. And then, of course, stay short, especially when you're up in the upper levels of management. They don't have much time. So the higher up you are in management, the shorter you need to be in your presentations and in your argumentation. And I've been told way too many times that I'm over-argumenting for design. Maybe it's because trust has already been established, that you can overdo it and think you need to sell it. And I think it's because a lot of us have been burned and we come out with bloody noses. And then we go into new meetings with our gloves on and ready to fight. You need to send your weight out of that. So some would say that trust building is just another form of stakeholder management, an empathic form of stakeholder management. But it's more than that. I would even say you can use it at home. But yeah, to some extent, that would also be stakeholder management. So who do you need to trust build with? I've written this graph where you have sort of the CEO up at the top. You have other designers and developers in your near vicinity. And I wrote this trust gateway. So what is that? Sometimes you have a good friend, or you have somebody you have eaten lunch with, or meet up at the coffee machine way too often, or you know him or her from some other place. If you have those trust gateways, use them. If you have a legal department, find a trust gateway in the legal department. It will carry you a long way, because I had one at Selling Group that I shared a lot of interest with, and I had him, I wouldn't say break the law, but I had him work when other people in the legal department would say, we're not going to spend our time on that because it's probably wrong. So we went a long way with a lot of things that I in other cases wouldn't have come anywhere, because both IT and legal usually have this attitude when you come to them. If you want to put in a new API into the development cycle, IT would usually say no, because they don't like they are resistant to change. And if you talk about people resistant to change, legal people are definitely down that road. Yeah, alliances. There was a lot of different ways of getting a seat at the table, and trust gateways are really good. Also for developers, sometimes you have a good developer friend that you go to either for internal testing or just talking about the front end layer. And it's really, really important, because that person will start broadening out the design field in terms of when you start selling design to him or her. When you have established trust with one person, it will sort of spread out. So this is a small graph I've made, where on one side you have mandate. It often comes in contract form. You're hired to do this. You are over these people. You have mandates to take these decisions. It's often about decisions, where trust is often about guidance. You can guide. If you have high trust as a designer, you can guide the organization, the product organization, to do a lot of things. It's nice to be the design person that has both decision power and trust. It's bad to be hired with decision power but don't have trust. People won't come to you for guidance. They will come to that other UX person that they trust more. So as you see, there is this obscure way of seeing mandate versus trust. And personally, I'm a bigger fan of trust. I've been in many situations where I didn't have mandate, but people up through the chain came to me for guidance, because I have established trust. I have broadened out or institutionalized UX in the organization. So people would come to me. Where does lack of trust stem from? Before I go into all of this, Laura, how are we on time?
It's 5:30. We have the building until 10 o'clock.
We have
I've been told.
Yeah. Yeah. But these are some some notions around where does lack of trust stem from. Of course, what I've seen is that it's normally inherently built into the organization from long ago. Organizations like, I wouldn't say Lego. Lego is pretty modern, but Salling Group, Vestas, these old organizations that had products before digital came, they still have roots in the old ways of working. And that old way was having different hierarchies, split up, people respecting management, and most of the ideas, they came from up top, right? So now we are seeing the landscape shift. So we are using specialists. The management is listening to the specialists, and it's nice to be UXing in these times. I see a lot of big organizations shift in terms of UX institutionalization. Yeah. This is a small toolbox I did for the presentation in terms of how to build trust. Meeting and workshops. We are building trust right now. Gathering up, talking to each other. Of course, I can stand up here and say a lot of bullshit, and that will work the other way. But I hope that some of this resonates, and you can sort of agree on a lot of these topics. Priming and influencing. So there's this thing about stay visible. It was also in this in the politics book. Just being visible all the time is also something that under the surface will build trust over time. It's coffee talk, coffee machine talk. You know, it's in the small cracks that you wouldn't really care about normally, but it's more important than you think. If you see a manager that maybe 2-3 levels over you that cares a bit about UX, cares about the products you're working on, take your time to go over and get a coffee and start talking to the person. You don't need to talk about work. If you find common ground, then you might find a joker. Let's say you both play golf or chess or something. You can talk about that. That instantly sparks trust in people. It's these small hacks that we don't really see in normal work, and that's why I won't talk too much about delivering the stable, constant, really good digital deliveries, because that's apparent. We all know that. It's these small things that they're going to elevate you up through the ranks. Strategic relationships. Back to the trust gateways. This might sound like dark patterns. Yes. That's actually a good question. That's a good question. I think there's a lot of things in remote work that cuts off a lot of these things. I heard Simon Sinek. He had a small video around what remote work did to trust, and I think he also curses it a bit. But there are elements like if you are in a meeting with a person and you feel there was one person that was really important for your work in that meeting, call that person up after the meeting, having a small talk after the meeting, just to be able to explain and ask questions. And I think I have it somewhere. Ask for help and offer help. It works both ways. It builds trust in both ways. Yes.
Yeah, I think just an answer to the at least possible way is sharing work and also inviting in for a lounge session or something. I work in a totally remote team, and then it's just a matter of offering just the space where you say, hey, I'll be available during this time. If you have any questions, then please come in, and also trying to share some of your work, some of the stuff that they won't see because they might sit somewhere completely different. So just sharing some of your process can sometimes just help people have awareness of where are you, and then they might reach out.
Yeah. And also, as I said before, being so humble to ask for help. So if you call a person up and figure out something that person might enlighten you with, or something that person can help you with, if that person has helped you, that builds a connection, that builds relationship, and it's really, really strong. I might say I have done that on purpose a lot of time, just to come up to a stakeholder and ask for something that I needed help with, and just seeing them shine when they do it. Because it's a people thing. It's a people thing. Take this home to your relationship. It will work. This also triggers, I just said bringing this home, the love language. It's also an important recent discovery in relationship building. Just acknowledging that the love language. Again, yes.
What would you do if the relationship already is hostile and reaching out to help offering help is seen as annoyance?
Oh, the last thing you said was actually putting it on edge, because my first thing would be to be humble enough to come to that person. I've been in situations where I've come out of a talk with my boss, and he said that there are 3 people that has a thing on you that's irritating something, and I insisted on knowing who it was because I needed to rebuild that relationship. And the first thing I did when I got the names was to go over there and just be completely humble and say that it's important for me to rebuild this tension, to rebuild the relationship based on the tension. So I think like it is really, really hard in a home struggle to say, I'm sorry. I think it's the same way here, right? You need to find some way in a professional manner, not to say I'm sorry, but just to give a notion that you want to rebuild the relationship. And I've actually also been lately thinking about how you approach the person, because if the person is sitting down, sometimes it's actually better to go below that person's eye height, instead of standing over him or her. And it's a whole body language thing also. So I think even though it can be really hard, then try to put yourself in a vulnerable situation where that other person can see that you are in a vulnerable situation and you really want to care about it. Yeah, so there are triggers that you will eventually find from people. Either your stakeholder is a huge nerd, or your stakeholder loves dogs or something like that. Those are entry points that really can get you far. And I really love the last one, culture. Board game nights, run clubs, music quizzes. I have a tendency when I come to a new place to send out small movie quizzes and things, and some get annoyed that I keep spamming them with fun stuff. But I also hear a lot of people that thinks it's really, really cute, and just to break out of normal work, just to do a quiz or something like that. And board games night. The 2 places I've been working at, I've hosted regular board games nights, and you see people coming in from legal and all other places that you might not have foreseen, but it's really, really beneficial to have spent 5 hours playing whatever Dungeons and Dragons with a person from legal. It really gives on your work that you have this person you can come to, even if you just want to hear about how is law on this. Trust and cognitive biases. I actually forgot I had the slide. I think to some extent, if you know about biases, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? The first info we get can really affect how we judge a good first impression. Yeah, and the halo effect, I think if you know Morten Mønster, the Danish author on behavioral science, he talks about the halo effect, where they tested a guy with a guitar in a dating environment, and the whole thing about having that third object that can pull people in, it's really fun to nerd out on. Yeah, I'm not going to go too far into this. So we had a slide about expected outcomes from low trust environments. We had the first slide on what are the benefits of high trust environments. These are one of the last slides I have. So you can see here, risk-taking, experiments, fail to learn culture. And it's, again, it's really, really fun time for UX actually, because I see this at Lego. I also saw this at Selling Group the last couple of years I was there. And I would also dare to say that I see it at Vestas, even though I'm not at Vestas. My wife is at Vestas. We talk about organizations and product organizations almost every night at the evening table, right? It's good fun to talk about politics in product organizations, and it's even better for me to stand here and to be able to get it out. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Reflecting on what you can do about yourself in order to build a high trust environment. Being unfortunate not being together with other people in the same mindset, how would you be able to initiate that in your environment, building that high trust environment?
When you say unfortunate not to be able to be with other people, is that on a physical basis or more mental?
Fortunately, colleagues are not in the same meeting as we are right now.
Yeah.
So they're not as informed as we are. And, you know, if you wanted to enforce a high trust environment,
yes,
an environment that's not in high trust, that's in low trust.
Yes.
How could you be the motivator for that environment to turn into a high trust, besides just yourselves and your boss?
Yeah, it's actually a good question, because some of these things that I put up here is navigating from under and up. But how do you change the management? And I think I've seen this question a few times, and I've never heard any answer for it, because it's really, really hard for us on the foot folks on the floor to change the mindset of management. I've been at the J. Boye Group, which is the UX group in Aarhus, where leaders of UX are meeting. I've been in that group for 10 years, and the topic has always been UX institutionalization. And for 10 years, we haven't come up with a proper recipe of reaching management, other than having this disease spread up from the bottom, right? So if they start seeing the whole product team or the whole front-end team starting to interact with each other and insisting on new processes. And I think the biggest changes I've seen is when new management people come in. You can't really do anything about that. You can only hope for a management shift, because often there's a new school manager coming in with a data mindset, and then it changes the whole game from day one. And then you have spent like 4 years on this, just struggling through low trust, and then he comes in and just changes everything because he has mandate. And of course it's brilliant, but you always also have this, God damn it. You can't do anything about it unless, of course, you get moved up. And some of these things can get you moved up, especially the first couple of slides where we talked about politics. I'm not talking about licking people's asses, sorry for my French, but something along that way. Yes?
There's a small point that I wanted to elaborate on, if you can, and that is, at some point you mentioned the method where you said that when reviewing designs, to say, what is the worst thing about this, to avoid bias, I think
Yeah.
you said?
Yeah.
How is that avoiding bias more than saying what's the best thing about this?
I think confirmation bias, usually when we sit and design something, we fall in love with it, right? And I think that's dangerous. I would encourage people to not spend too much time on one thing before you either question yourself or tell other people to question you.
Right, so to not spend too much time on the same idea to other options.
Yes, exactly. I try to spend my time. Let's say I'm designing a component. I would love to design 8 components, and then either have my wife check it out, she's also a product designer, or other designers, or even the stakeholders. I have a project manager right now that is the best project manager I've ever had, and I use him a lot for design, even though he doesn't know anything about design. You know, his intuition and his knowledge about the roadmap and the targets and where management is going in here is really valuable for me. Yes? I think I'm known for that right now. Yeah, for doing it. I think I'm at a Lego project right now where I actually was chosen because they know that I would challenge status quo. And I think it's an identity you start getting when you do it while excusing yourself while doing it, right? You need to sort of tell the room that it's not because I hate it. It's that we all need question the work that we put on the table, or else we will just drown in confirmation bias. I think that's one of the biggest biases that we hit all the time as shape givers, right? We shape products, front enders shape the product, back enders shape the product, the product managers. We all need to start out by saying, is this really the product, the initiative we need, and what is the worst thing about this initiative or this process we're doing? If we aren't able to do that, then we're not empathic enough in terms of being able, or humble enough, I would say, to shoot our own work down. We need to be able to do that if we want to do bulletproof work.
Do you think shifting towards the communication and building the trust instead of more reporting, so cutting back the reporting, it would be some kind of a solution and strengthening this trust in the company and between the different levels? I
think I've been in a lot of situations where I would spend almost half of my time reporting, either doing PowerPoints for the annual something or the monthly business review or something like that. And it's really, really hard to fight something like that. I'm not sure if it's directly involved with trust building or if it's just doing the regular work that they want you to do. I think start questioning if we should spend time on reporting rather than just talking together. I had a vulnerable point with one of my managers at some point where I said to him, I really want us to talk together outside meetings. Every time he wanted to talk to me, it was a calendar invite. And I felt that was low trust, bad culture. And I'm also really sensitive to corporate BS. So I really want us to have an environment. We sat pretty close to each other, but we never talked. I really wanted to have an environment where we could stand up and walk to each other's desk and just both say good and bad stuff to each other. And of course, not all people are ready to get a small shit sandwich in their face while being exposed in an open office. But I think we need to build resilience in our teams to be able to also take some of these things in, to be able to move faster and be able to move together, holding hands, rather than this competitive environment of it's me versus you, and this one-to-one, you sit on that side of the table, I sit on this side of the table, and I bash you until you get sweaty hands. Yes.
How much of it is it like a personality type also? So you have obviously double yellow.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff you have on the how to gain trust is social skills.
Right? Yes.
So what if you're blue on top and and you also say people are who they are, it rarely change that much?
Yeah, but
I just have to do it though.
I love that you asked that question. I was really keen just a few days ago on doing like 5 extra slides on these personalities, how trust building are on different personality levels. I would say read that book Surrounded by Idiots. It's really talking into how you need to manage different types of people and what their triggers are. And yeah, it can be daunting to always go to a dominating person and sort of elevate your own dramatic voice and being just as enthusiastic as him. And it can be really taxating on one's mood. But
how's like the thing about being genuine and then being like virtual signaling and doing it for the sake of I'm not going to use you for something or in the future the gateway kind of.
I think in all of the years I've been consulting, being genuine has really paid off. Being able to walk into a meeting with Vestas or even Bang & Olufsen with a hoodie and a cap and being like this really creative person, and they know they pay a lot of money for you to come with your special. But if you are in an organization that's big and maybe the people you work with weren't the people that hired you, they really just want value from you, and it can be hard for them to, if there's too big of a culture gap, to connect. So if you feel that you are in a low trust environment and you really want to massage your way to a better place or your work to a better place, these are the small hacks. But you can be in a situation right now where you feel it's not that important because there is some medium high trust environment around you. Then I encourage you to just sit back and enjoy it. Yes.
Often we're trying to sell customer experience or user experience as a byproduct, and you are like talking to other stakeholders that don't see the value of that.
To some extent, yes. I would say that back to we had a point about stakeholders. I think it's here. Sometimes I've seen this, that to some extent, when you come and present a new big design change, either it comes from you or it comes from insights. That stakeholder is usually also managing front end and back end. And if you come and say it's best for us if we change this whole checkout flow, but then they will start seeing design as a burden, or they already do see design as a burden, not because of you, but because of past events that has happened. So that's yeah. Some other things also, but it's a sensitive subject, right? How your project manager is. Some project managers love design and are really advocating for it just as much as you. But right now, I have the project manager I love so much right now. He sometimes sees this as a burden because he just wants to move forward. We are such in a hurry. We have deadlines, and if you can, jump in his pocket and just ride along with him, then you will be better friends along the way. Yes.
Because I think like this, I work at Lego myself, looks like a different company from what you experience with what I'm doing, I have to say, maybe because I'm in the commercial internal area.
Yes.
But I feel like design often acts as a facilitator, a catalyst, like a supporting force. It can push a lot of work forward, but then often contributions land, or like the praise lands on product, lands on engineering, lands on business over design. I was curious to hear your perspective on if you experience it often, and if there's something that you do
Yes.
about that.
I experience often. I'm just looking for a slide where there's a thing. I think it's actually next to this one. Yeah. The roadmap ownership. You often get baffled by the priorities in design. Sometimes, as you say, that it can shift to more engineering focus in some situations, and then you have a hard time following where's the needle pointing at. How do you want me to deliver? And I really just want to underline, I don't feel that Lego is a low trust environment. I just feel that they have a lot of these things where you need to follow the value that Lego wants to build. Of course.
I agree with that. It's like, Mr. Selling, they are really in the past Lego was modern. Like, it depends on where you are in Lego, and then I'll you on that.
That's good.
So
no, I haven't had my feelings into Lego Group. I'm working with Lego House right now, and
for example, like commercial process, right? Like right now we're pushing a big change. We're changing a process, and it comes from insights, right?
Yes.
From user research.
Yes.
So it's been like pushed a lot by design, by me and other folks. So it's been about me and my product team. But ultimately, the decision is made. So this new shiny process is from business.
Yes.
So it's business who gets the credit. It's business who gets the praise. And design sort of like stands in the shadows, right? And I always I guess that's myself. Like, okay, do we need to fight it, or is just accept that this is just the way it is, right? And as long as you know that you have the influence, it's enough, and you work from
definitely. I had actually a line here that says that stakeholders doesn't really care who did the great work. They care more about, we're gonna raise the conversion rate, or this is gonna be really good. So it's unfortunate that we are in a field where we are the shape. We give the shape for the products, but are not necessarily recognized for it. And I would say if it's an initiative that you guys and your team started, and it at least started from the bottom up, and you changed the perspective of management and they accepted it, I would go home being happy, especially if you've been trying other big organizations out where it's just a no. And that's one of the things that Joe also says a lot, is that we get so many no's, and it creates bloody noses for UXers, and it can be hard. But yeah.
Yeah, we work with a bunch of products and services. So can you think of like what is one of the processes or one of the collaborations where you had the most both fun and also a bit of a flow state to the collaborations, to the trust, and why do you think that is?
Actually, I was in Trifork in 14 when we did a Lego product. It was called Boost. And I'm not going to highlight especially where's Trifork? Yeah, 15. I was really baffled by all the experience I had with agile and processes that just came into the landscape, and everybody was doing it wrong. I really felt that I couldn't fit in as a designer, and Discovery in general couldn't fit into the whole agile landscape. And when we started in West Nocibra, there, when we started in Nocibra, Valtech came in and told us how to do agile, and nobody could explain how Discovery fitted into the agile. When I started at Trifork back then, it was perfect. They had the perfect recipe for how to do it. They had the perfect contract with Lego on moving forward that was not waterfall. It was my first experience with not working with waterfall. And when I came back to Trifork, up at the top here, doing Lego House, it's the same experience. Somehow, I think it's bound within the contract of how we work with our clients. Also because we have such big clients that we create the freedom of saying, we work with you for the next 2 years and then we see. It's not like we need to deliver this website, this product, this thing for however. And I'm also pulled out of all the politics, and that's the what I love about being a consultant or being a contractor, is that you're just hired to do the good work. I really love that. Even though I did love my time at Selling Group, I learned a lot of things. I learned over all these things that I'm standing here saying. But I spent over half the time doing that, not the product. So yeah, I think that was my answer.
And that's a good note to end on. Thank you for all of the very engaging questions, and thank you, Philip.